Hello, hi, I'm Dr. Tiffanie Noonan, and I am here to present the topic today of setting limits that peacefully stick. Um, I want to apologize. This was going to be live. However, sometimes we can all get a little over ambitious with our schedules or life comes up, and I am human just like the rest of you. And my availability at 4 p.m. today is not as open as I thought that it was going to be. So I am going to record this now and upload it so that you can still plan to see it or watch it at the same time. And then I'm going to ask that you please know that you can ask questions in the group thread underneath of where I post it, or you can PM me and send me a message personally through Facebook, or you can send me an email at drtiffanie@epicparenting.org. That's DRTIFFANIE at epicparenting.org. So today's topic is setting limits peacefully. And as I'm loading the slides for that, I just wanted to remind you that I am honoring you for showing up and looking to say, how can I do things differently with my children? And, you're 4 days into the No Spank Challenge. I imagine if this is a new topic to you, that there's been a lot of new information or different ways of thinking about things. And please know that there is support for you if you are struggling or having questions about it, right? But I so respect your willingness and ability to look at things differently and find other ways of dealing with conflict or with communicating with your children, or really being able to look at things from a different perspective than you may have experienced as a child. One of the main reasons why I so love doing this work is because this sentence is so very true, that the way we talk to our children becomes their inner voice. And if we think about the stories that run in our own head, and, as a parenting coach and as a pediatrician that primarily now works with parents on creating connection with their children, the story running in our head really dictates the life that we create, and the beliefs that we have can cloud and affect every way that we see the world and what we experience. And to have a goal of raising our children to have an inner voice of, I am enough and I am capable and I am worthy, is so incredibly important to me. That I think we all get to work on figuring out what that looks like. And if you're honest with yourself, even questioning what beliefs or stories you have that when you're feeling like you're struggling, very often a lot of my clients, there is a story of not being important, or nobody listens to me, or I'm not blank enough, whatever the blank is, fill in the blank, rich enough, pretty enough, thin enough, smart enough, or whatever the case is, and really striving to have our children know that they were born enough as they are. And using the way that we set limits to not change that voice and have it be a question of their own worth. So that's our topic for today. For those of you who do not know who I am, like I said, my name is Dr. Tiffanie Noonan. I am a board certified pediatrician with 20 plus years of experience at this point. I started my company, Epic Parenting, which stands for Empowered, Peaceful, Inspired, and Connected Parenting, in 2013. And since then, I've been primarily coaching families and creating connection and creating change, and really helping parents feel empowered, peaceful, inspired, and connected with their children, and shifting the paradigm from control to connection so that they have more joy and more peace and more of the life that they truly desire to create, and the relationships that they desire to create. And today's topic is setting limits that peacefully stick. It is my intention to have every parent or person viewing this to feel empowered to confidently set limits that enhance connection, peace, and that honor their own family values. I sort of have always loved this little meme or quote from Pink that says, I am not going to take my daughter's fierceness personally. My mom took all of my behavior personally and thought it was rebellion against her. It was just me being me. I want to remember this with my daughter. It's not about me. And that's a tough thing to remember when you're raising children sometimes, that their feelings, their emotions, their expressions are really not about us. They're not to drive us crazy, even though sometimes it can feel that way. And then we're able to take that step back and look at it more from, let me get to know this person and how can we better communicate so that our limits are being honored and so that we are coming together to create connection. It is truly beautiful, and it does require being able to take that step back and think about things a little bit differently. So setting limits with children is about learning. It's not from the perspective of how I teach it about them obeying. So very often in our culture, we want our kids to obey the rules, right? And you will probably have noticed I'm a few minutes into this and I have not once said the word rules. And we're going to talk about that. But that's a short-term strategy of just obey the rules. Do this because you were told to do this or because it's a rule. And when you inspire a child to learn a valuable limit, you're giving them a lifetime gift. What that means is that they're learning how to think through the value and the reason and understanding the limit that you're setting so that they can learn to trust themselves to make decisions in the future that they may not have been presented with a rule or a limit on. You're helping inspire them to be able to think for themselves through what it is that's being asked of them or what they're trying to do. So setting limits in the epic paradigm is more about holding space for the limit to exist, along with holding space for any feelings around that particular limit. And the idea of holding space for is being present and being supportive. And it allows for the child to process the learning that's taking place. You're holding space for the child means acknowledging if they don't like the limit that you're setting. It doesn't mean, by the way, that they don't necessarily get to learn to deal with it. They may not like what you're saying no to or what you're asking them to do. Generally, a limit is what you're saying no to very often. They may not like it, but when they understand it and you allow them to process their feelings around it, you're not going to have that same limit setting conversation over and over and over again, or the conversation about them breaking the limit over and over again, because they can learn to process it, feel about it, and then understand why it's being asked of them. So why do we set limits? As parents or caregivers or whatever role you're coming to this event with, you're here to serve as your child's guide to learn about the world, to learn what's dangerous or risky, to learn how to relate to others, how to think through decisions, how to explore what their values are, how to contribute to the world, and so much more. And one of the core needs of adults and children, if you saw my talk from a few days ago, we really talked about diving into basic needs, human needs. One of the core needs is to feel confident and to feel safe. And for the children to feel safe, they very much need to know that the adults are connected to them and that they are there to protect them, to guide them, and to help keep them safe. So what is a peaceful limit? A peaceful limit is one that is developmentally appropriate based on realistic expectations. A limit that is respectful of the feelings and the needs of the child and actually everybody involved, not just children. A limit that is reflective of your family values, and a limit that is carefully and consciously planned. So a limit isn't something that emerges from it's just because it's the way it's always been done, or it's the way that I was told to do it, or that's what society expects of me, right? Those are unconscious patterns of control and of, often with that comes punishment or consequences that the parent themselves experienced when they were growing up. Those are not considered peaceful or peaceful limits, because you're not making that limit based on family values, being respectful, and actually taking into consideration the developmental age of the child. A peaceful limit is a unique process of teaching and supporting the child. So limits are not demands emerging from a need to control or an expectation of complete obedience. So it is not a peaceful limit if you are simply trying to control or stop a behavior and cannot be explained by family values. And it is not a limit if there's just an expectation that when you say do X, your child does X immediately. You know, the saying, like, if I say jump, they say how high, because that isn't actually teaching anything. And a limit is not necessarily the end of a conversation. It's the beginning of a conversation to offer a child empathy, to seek to understand them, and it offers your child ways to learn how to meet their needs or satisfy their basic human needs as well. So a limit in the epic paradigm way is not the end of the story. I said X, no further conversation, because that isn't actually getting the point of understanding and learning a lesson. That's expecting compliance. In setting a peaceful limit, as I mentioned, you need to, or I would strongly suggest it's important to allow space for feelings and needs. So it may very well be that your child is not going to like the limit that you set, and that is okay. Can you allow space for them to be upset, to cry, to express the fact that they aren't understanding, or that they don't like that you necessarily told them that they're not allowed to run across the street in traffic, right? A very important limit. But if they're expressing their need for play or they're being playful, they may not be happy with it in that moment. But it doesn't mean that you can't hold space to say, I understand that it's upsetting to you, and we still get to stick to this limit because, and then express the value. Your limit is important to you if it's grounded in those family values, like I was just referring to. And we still want to always allow space for the child to express their feeling around it. Like I said, this doesn't mean just because the child may not like it in that moment, or that their feelings are big about the limit, it doesn't mean that there's flexibility in the limit in that moment. If it is important and you can feel confident and firm in what you're teaching, and that you can explain it based on a value, you can allow them to be upset. That doesn't have to be fixed. So this is a list or a picture of universal needs, and I'm not going to go through them. We talked about them the other day. If you didn't see my talk from the other day, I'm going to encourage you to go back and watch the live to really think about basic human needs. But just briefly, things like connection, play, autonomy, the real physiological needs, right? Food, exercise, oxygen, air. There's so many needs that are important. And the general concept that I mentioned the other day, all behavior is a best attempt to get a need met, still applies. So thinking about what the need is underneath of the behavior, even if the behavior is not necessarily wanting to follow through on a limit that you set. So what is the difference between a rule and a limit? Now, it may just be semantics at this point. I discuss this with my one-on-one clients all of the time. But in my mind, a rule is not flexible. It doesn't allow space for other opinion. It doesn't allow space for consideration, for growth, and for possibly changing with the age of the child, right? A rule is something that you're telling is set in stone. And in the space of parenting, that doesn't allow for a lot of connection. And it doesn't allow the children to feel like they're allowed to have a say. What I like about limits is that the concept is that it gets to be discussed. It's explained based on family values, and it allows your child to recognize that there is flexibility in it, not that you may change it at that moment, but that you hear them and that their opinion matters, and that you are willing to engage in the conversation around the limit. So this picture here, I've explained this one before, but I used to have a rule. My son had to hold my hand in the parking lot when he was 2, and he had a strong need for autonomy, and he would have a temper tantrum every time. And when I got more flexible in noticing his need for autonomy, and instead of having a rule that you need to hold my hand without flexibility, I said, you need to stay attached to me. You can hold my hand, hold my coat, hold my purse, but as we're walking through this parking lot, I need you to be connected to me in some way. The limit is, and that's because we have a family value of keeping our body safe. It's important to me that you feel safe. And that was the important aspect. So the limit allowed for flexibility, allowed me to think outside of the box instead of feeling like he was just not being compliant with a rule that I was setting. So the most important part in setting limits is to have some clarity in regards to our family values and what they truly are. So if you are not clear on your family values, then the tendency for most parents is to revert to the limits that they learned in childhood, or what they think the people are doing at the playground next to them, or what is expected. And when they're your own family values, when you've conscientiously sat down and thought, what are important ways that we believe is important for us as a family to live our life that are significant? This is a conversation that you get to have with not just all the adults in the family, but with the children as well. And you teach these as being important. When we first had this conversation in my family back in 2012, I think, my husband and I came to the table with respect, love, and safety. Safety is no longer a family value, by the way. That was fear-based, but I did say I'm a pediatrician, and I was living a little bit more fear-based life at the time. And we allowed our children input into the conversation, and my 4-year-old child at the time chose health, and my 3-year-old child chose fun, which we thought was a really cool and fun family value. So for years, we talked about our family values when it wasn't a limit, as like, this is important. What does respect mean? What does it look like? This is how we make decisions. And then when I was setting limits or saying no to something, I only would say no with the explanation of, remember that family value of respect or of safety or of fun. Like, this is not in alignment with that value. And that's the reason why I can't say yes to this. Do you remember that value? Can you see how this? And it was a conversation. It wasn't just me being a dictator. Those are the values that you're going to be teaching your children, and also that you're going to be working with them to think about what they think is important in life. And so when they're facing situations in life that aren't necessarily, they haven't experienced before, they don't know what the limit is, they don't know what the rule is, but they have a firm understanding of thinking through family values, you can trust that they are going to be better prepared to make these decisions for themselves. And isn't that ultimately what we're hoping to do, is to raise children that are getting older and older, thinking for themselves and going out into the world with a strong sense of who they are and who they wish to be in the world. Like I said, you're going to be explaining the reasoning behind each value and limit to your child, and that'll help your explanations also feel more authentic. You won't have to resort to the because I said so. Why, right? You could ask you why, because I said so. That isn't teaching a lesson. So I am going to encourage you to sign up for the 10 days from conflict to connection, the 10 days to a more peaceful home course. If you haven't already signed up for it, it's free during the duration of the Snow Spank Challenge. There is a 100% off coupon code. It'll take you to my website. You sign up, you use the coupon code. It'll be $0, like no credit card information taken, $0. And you will get access to 10 days of short videos and an action step that will really help cement this epic process to you. But the epic process is something that we use when there is conflict that's coming up. So in the context of this conversation today, if you're setting a limit and there is conflict in regards, so your child is having big feelings and you're starting to have a disagreement, what do you do, right? And this is a process that actually helps you come to a win-win and create a solution at the end where everyone can feel seen and feel heard. Just as a brief summary, it stands for evaluate with presence, pay attention to feelings and needs, inspired connection with empathy, and create a win-win solution. And we're not going to take the time out today to really teach that further, because you have access to that free course that you can sign up for and really cement it in over the next week and a half. Those are big feelings right there. Just so you know, when it comes to setting limits, I do believe in safety first. I made that example, like if your child wants to run across the street, I am not going to expect or suggest that you allow them to run across the street and then create connection and whatever. Like if there's a risk of them being hurt, I don't need to tell you to keep your child safe, right? It may not look peaceful in the moment. You may not be reasoning with them if you need to swoop in and pick them up, reconnect afterwards. I don't know that that needs to be said, but I do think it is important to remember that safety comes first. If you believe that they're truly at risk of hurting themselves, toddlers are good at that, right? Toddlers are pretty good at trying to make you think that they are going to do something where they're going to be at great risk, and because they don't understand the risk. Swoop in, get them safe, calm yourself down, and then reconnect and discuss it. Another important aspect while we're setting limits for children is just remembering that the adult gets to act as the emotional coach and facilitate problem solving. That's a big role, though. That means the adult also gets to take the responsibility of staying centered or re-getting centered or acknowledging if they're not centered and they have to come back to the conversation, and then help facilitate the problem solving instead of the expectation of compliance. So I wanted to give you a few examples of what this would look like. So let's say you have an 18-month-old child, right? You got a toddler, you're both at home, and your child is so excited and wants to climb up on something. She's getting used to her big muscles. This is developmentally age appropriate, right? I have big muscles and I want to show them off. She's got really proud of herself. Big smile on her face. She reaches up and makes her way under the dining room table. Very excited kid. You don't think it's safe. And you have a limit that you don't want her climbing on the table that your family eats on, right? So let's just say the limit that you are setting for your child is we do not climb up on the dining room table, right? What's the limit you're setting? We don't climb on the table. You're going to want to explain your reason. We eat our meals here on this table, and we all want this table to be clean for our food. I also worry that you could fall and get hurt, and that makes me feel anxious. So your family value that you're discussing there is saying, remember how we've talked about how cleanliness and safety are important in this family. This is the reason why I don't want you to do that. If, of course, you've had a conversation that cleanliness and safety are family values. Like I said, we drop safety as a family value, respect for our body. We still don't put ourselves into dangerous situations, but figuring out what values align with your family is on you. Cleanliness is not. I mean, we're not dirty people, but I've never tried to sell cleanliness as a family value because it's not as important to me as service and integrity and the other important lessons that I'm teaching my children. Remember, what makes this unique for your family is that it's your family. It's what's really important to you and to your home. So that would be an example, though, of setting a limit and explaining it based on the values that you've already discussed ahead of time. And just as we talked a couple of days ago and through the EPIC process, a great way of getting out of this is acknowledging the need that your child is having to use her big, strong muscles and to play, and making a suggestion where she can meet that need while not climbing on the table. And a second example is brothers fighting, because we all know that they do that. They're having fun playing, and something goes awry, and your 5-year-old's getting more frustrated and then runs over, thinks it's the 7-year-old thinks it's funny that he's getting frustrated. The 5-year-old runs and hits the 7-year-old, right? We all know that siblings can have these conflicts and challenges, and a 5-year-old hitting a 7-year-old out of frustration is probably not uncommon if you have more than one child in your house. So what is it you're wanting? You're wanting both of your children to learn how to play together. And beyond that, you want them to learn how to solve problems without actually physically hurting each other or hitting each other. So, and why are you going to explain that to that? One, hitting hurts, right? And it's not respectful of the other person. So what limit are you going to set if you're noticing this behavior? The limit, we don't hit each other, right? That's the limit. We don't hit each other. And you're going to explain the reasoning behind that is because hitting each other's body hurts and it doesn't show respect for the other person. And as we've discussed in our family values, respect is important. And let's talk about, do you remember when we had that conversation? Again, this is if you've had the conversation with your children about your family values and if respect is one of them. Love is one of ours. So if we didn't have the conversation about respect, this exact same situation would still be able to be explained by that's not loving behavior, if that's a family value. But really recognizing what value is being violated that's causing you to set a limit. So letting go of resistance. Very often, I mean resistance from our children, right? To the no's that we say. So I think it's important to recognize that very often we say no out of habit or very quickly before we even think about what it is that we're saying, right? So we quote unquote know the rules and it's our job to enforce them, right? I'm here to tell you, maybe not. So often your child may react to your no with resistance. Just the saying of no puts up a wall and it starts a power struggle. So if you're finding yourself in that battle of the wills with the no's where you say no and then they automatically resist it regardless of what you're saying no to, I wanted to share with you what I like to refer to as it's a secret connection to avoid this power struggle. And that's really saying the yes before the no. And what that means is when you, if there's any salespeople here, it's sort of like a presumptive close, like leading someone in sales to buy something from you. Right. You ask them a lot of questions where they say yes first. And then when you get down to setting the limit, they're already in that yes mode and feeling seen and feeling validated. And then you're more likely to sell something. At least that's what I've heard. I'm not in sales. But this is the yes before the no. And what this does is allow your child to know that their feelings do matter. It helps them build their emotional intelligence and self-esteem. And what does it look like? Right. So this is just another example there. It's after dinner, they're eating their dessert and they threw their ice cream all over the floor. Instead of immediately responding with, no, we don't throw our food on the floor, you can instead validate, or hopefully they only threw like a spoonful of it, right? So there's more ice cream to throw. If you just say no, they may think that this is a game and keep throwing the ice cream, but instead you can validate their experience, right? And get them to say yes first, right? Ice cream is really slimy, huh? It is. They're going to say yes. It seems like you're really it's really fun to throw things, huh? Yes. You want to play, huh? Yes. But, right, now you're going to change it. We don't throw ice cream because it makes the floor slippery and somebody might fall or whatever the reason is. Again, hopefully in alignment with your family values. So you see them, you acknowledge what it is that they're doing, and then you step in with the limit. And this is why we don't do it. And it's also a great idea if you give them an alternative that they can do, because then they're not thinking about what they can't do. So kind of priming them with the yeses will help them stay engaged in the conversation long enough to learn the value and what it is you're trying to actually accomplish. So my yes before no aha moment. I came to this work naturally, by the way, which was by struggling and not knowing how to connect with my children and not feeling like they listened to me for a long time. And one of them, I gave this example the other day, was My son used to climb on the back of the couch, and I would say, no, we don't climb in the back of the couch, and tell him to get down, and he would. And then 2 minutes later, he would get back up on the back of the couch, and I would tell him to get down, right? I'm talking about the younger son in this picture who's up on the up on top of the playground thing there. My boys are actually almost 12 and 13 years old now. So this picture was taken quite a while ago, but he's always been a bit of a monkey. He's climbing on things, and more often than I would like to report, we ended up with me yelling at him and him crying every night because he wasn't listening to me to not climb on the back of the couch. And when I decided to think of this differently, and he climbed up on the back of the couch, and I said, you know, first of all, I had to have some empathy for myself. I was tired. It was after work. I was exhausted and quite honestly tired of having this no climbing on the back of the couch. So a little empathy for myself. I took a deep breath before I did this and was like, I don't want to yell. We're obviously not learning the lesson because the same thing is happening over and over again. So I got to have a conversation where I said, you really like climbing up on the back of the couch, right? Yeah. I'm like, it's fun to be able to use your muscles and climb up there, right? Yeah. You want to play right now, huh? Yeah. Yes, right. He had his yeses. And I said, that's great. I see that. I understand that. And it isn't safe for you to be on the back of the couch. And then I gave an alternative. But I want you to be able to play and have fun right now. What if we took the cushions off the couch and put them on the ground and you can jump, right? He honored my limit. He actually stopped jumping on the back of the couch and started taking the cushions off the couch. He had a new alternative to practice what he wanted and still honor the limit of no climbing on the back of the couch because mom's afraid you're going to crack your head open. So setting limits that peacefully stick does allow for exploring solutions together. And you get to engage your child in the dialogue of how do we want this to look and to explore what the options are. That's why they're limits and not rules. You get to ask them how we can accomplish this limit together, right? And again, that's more connection. They feel like they matter. They feel more significant in the family, and you're a lot less likely to have a lot of the bigger feelings when your children's needs for significance, for connection are being met. And again, your children are perceptive. When things make sense and they're logical, when you are able to explain them from that place of the family values and you feel firm and connected in your reasoning, natural cooperation very often is what you're going to experience. And like I said, because I said so is not logical nor persuasive reason to do anything. So the reason why I think this is important to do for everybody is that we are growing people, and depending on the age of your children, super important reason for me. When I first started doing this talk, it was in 2014, which was 8 years ago. And it was years down the road that it was going to be someone other than me that was going to be the authority figure in my children's lives. Like I said, my kids now are 12 and 13 years old. And it's been a while since I've been the most important authority figure, right? And I have to tell you that this is the reason why I am so passionate about this work, about learning how to set limits in a way that is based on family values, because from my experience, it works even better than I thought it did when I started giving this talk 8 years ago. And I'm going to explain what that means. So the reason why I think it's important is because we want them to be able to think through what is important, what our family values are, how they feel inside when they're making a decision of what they're doing, so that if they are presented with drugs or alcohol or whatever the case may be, that they don't just do it because the authority figure says so, right? Because they're just supposed to say yes without questioning why, without understanding why. And the ability to say no at home and be able to work things out and be able to trust yourself is such an important skill and gift for them. So having your child understand natural consequences is really important. Now, as I'm sitting here 2 years ago now, my kids went off to a birthday party at their friend's house. They could walk to, it was a couple houses over. And we had a limit at that time. It's only recently changed. I'm still not sure I'm happy about the change, but they're getting older. And I guess that's the part that I may have a challenge with sometimes. They went off to a birthday party and they were not allowed to play Fortnite in our house. It was not a video game that was in alignment with our family values. And they came home from the birthday party sooner than I was expecting them to be home. And I was like, what are you guys doing here? And they said, we were playing outside for a while, but then everybody went inside and they started playing Fortnite. And we know that that's not in alignment with our family values. So we came home. They didn't have to. I didn't know what they were playing. They did not have to come home. Now, truth be told, I said, I love you. I love that you're honoring our family values. I love that I know and I can trust you to think through the things. And we've never had this circumstance before. You're there for a day. It's okay if you go play with your friends, go back to the birthday party. We will not be downloading that in our house, but for the birthday party circumstances, it is okay. But they came home. That's happened in other times when their friends were acting out of alignment with our family values, climbing fences to go into playgrounds that were locked off at a church. Everyone else climbed the fence. My boy said, literally, it didn't feel good in my belly to climb a fence that was locked. So we decided to come home. I don't have to worry about whether or not they're going to consider how things feel to them and whether or not they like the way what they're doing makes them feel and what the natural consequences of it are. Does that mean they're never going to mess up? Please. Of course, they're going to make decisions that are maybe not in perfect alignment with our family values. And they're going to have to face the natural consequences because they are growing humans that are just like me, probably going to mess up from time to time. I mess up too. And they can call me out on our family values sometimes. So when your child faces hard choices and peer pressure, what do you want them to know? How do you want them to address it? And do you want them to just say yes because they've learned to just comply with the authority figure? Or do you want them to actually understand where limits are coming from and make choices based on what feels good for them? So this I add on to the end of every talk that I do, which is being a more peaceful parent today. Listen, it is super important that you take care of yourself for any of this work that you're doing, for any time that you're connecting, and for any parenting. If it's cliche, but it's true, if your cup is empty, you cannot give to other people. And when you're attempting to do the work of peaceful parenting, conscious parenting, nonviolent parenting, epic parenting, whatever you want to call it, the ability to stay centered, the ability to look at a situation and not be quickly triggered is greatly affected by how well you're taking care of yourself. So take the time today to connect with yourself. Spend some time today to connect with your child with full attention. This is what I mean, full attention. Put it someplace for 10 minutes. It's hard. It makes noises. It gives you notifications. We can let it go. If you are feeling stressed, you're feeling grumpy, you're feeling frustrated, ask yourself, why might I be feeling this way? And what might I need? And if your children are feeling stressed, grumpy, or frustrated, ask yourself, I wonder what's going on for them and what might they need? Instead of trying to, one, control it and tell them to stop. It's their feelings, and their feelings cannot truly be in question, right? That is simply what they are feeling or they're expressing at that moment. Wonder what the need is underneath of it and help them get curious about that, but be willing to do the same thing for yourself, please. Acknowledge that you're really listening. Make eye contact. Take a deep breath. Say, I hear you. Repeat it back to them if you're not actually clear. And then get outside in nature. Hopefully, it's a stunning day here in Charleston, South Carolina today in the low 70s and sunny. So hopefully wherever you are, it's similar. Be a more peaceful parent by taking a moment to connect with your child before making any request or setting any limit. What does that look like? Get on your knee, put your hand on your shoulder, make eye contact, really acknowledge them. Help practice feelings vocabulary with your children. That means acknowledging your own feelings as well, depending on their age. It could just be you get to admit, I'm feeling angry right now. I'm feeling frustrated. I'm feeling exhausted. I'm feeling joyful. I'm feeling nervous. Glennon, I don't know what her last name is now, Melton, Glennon Doyle. I heard her give a talk. I love the word skited right now, like scared and excited, right? I'm a little skited about that. So I will acknowledge that I'm scared, but I'm going to do it anyway because I'm excited for the outcome. Take the time to identify a need you have and express it to another person. Like, I notice that I'm feeling a need for rest. I'm a little tired. I had a crazy schedule day today. I will let my family know that I am feeling exhausted right now and that I have a need for some solitude at some point today. And I get to get that need met. And be a more peaceful parent, play a little today, be a little silly, a little goofy, at least once a day. And be kind to yourself. You're a human. And if you're struggling, feeling guilty, having a hard time being kind to yourself, reach out to me. It is my job to say, I honor you. I think you're doing an amazing job. We all screw up from time to time. And I promise you that you do deserve to forgive yourself and then move forward. So I hope if you have any questions about this topic, you reach out to me and that you have an amazing rest of the week.